Dear friends, I welcome with happiness the initiative of the online screening of the film Polish Airmen Fighting for Freedom by Marek Borzecki. It is still not widely known that in the Battle of Britain, after the British, the Poles were the largest contingent in the Royal Air Force and, most importantly, the highest scoring squadron in that battle was Polish, famous 303 Squadron. Their bravery is a source of immense pride for Poland and the Polish community in the United Kingdom. It is thanks in large part to the Polish pilots and their achievements that the Poland's ties with the UK are so strong, and the bonds of friendship between our peoples continue despite the uncertain times in the true spirit of loyalty and teamwork. I hope that thanks to this film, the bravery of the Polish pilots will forever be present in the collective memory of our two countries. This brotherhood in arms permanently binds our nations. I wish you all, my Polish and British friends, a wonderful screening of this film, honoring our joint history and heritage.
The Polish Airforce War Memorial at South Ruislip was unveiled in 1948 to honour and commemorate the Polish airmen killed during the Second World War whilst under British command. This prominent memorial, often wrongly referred to as the Polish War Memorial, is close to the southeastern perimeter of RAF Northolt. Between 1941 and 1944, this station was the home of 7 Polish fighter squadrons on rotation, making up a Polish fighter wing. So it is particularly fitting that RAF Northolt now hosts the only permanent exhibition in Britain dedicated to the Polish Air Force during the Second World War.
Northolt to mój dom, to drugi dom. Jak myśmy tu przyszli do Northoltu od 1941 roku, 3 dywizjony były tutaj stale aż do inwazji. Myśmy tu się czuli jak w domu.
For me, as a pilot in the Royal Air Force, I was brought up on all the stories of the Battle of Britain. It's iconic in our history. And as an aviator, a man who flies aircraft, it's hugely important. Certainly the artifacts in the Polish lounge, each has a special memory, really. I think certainly flying logbooks, which articulate and lay out the dogfights that the pilots undertook back in the 40s, is poignant. You know, leather flying helmets and goggles. You know, they're iconic and add to the atmosphere of being in a Hurricane or a Spitfire back in 1940. You know, cramped, and the smell of aviation gas and the smell of sweat, the smell of fear. And getting airborne and taking the fight to the enemy. That's what the artifacts in this place evoke, really, for me.
The lounge was opened on the 14th of February 2007 by the last Polish president in exile, Ryszard Kaczorowski. The exhibition tells the story of Polish airmen and highlights their achievements during the Second World War in Poland, in France, and in England, which for them was Wyspa Ostatniej Nadziei, the island of the last hope. In 1918, at the end of the First World War, Poland recovered her independence after 123 years of occupation by the Russians, the Prussians, and the Austrians. It was once more a free country, but devastated after the First World War, with virtually no resources. Nonetheless, one of the first things they managed to do was to create an extraordinarily successful and effective aircraft industry. In 1932, at the Paris Air Show, the Polish aviation produced the Pesatel P-7, which was the world's first all-metal monoplane fighter. Nobody else had anything like it at the time. The only problem was that by 1939, the Pesatel P-11 as a fighter was outclassed by the latest German designs, and on the bomber front, while there were about 80 in total, only half the Polish total of bombers was of the more modern sort. And so they faced the might of the Luftwaffe when they invaded on the 1st of September 1939, outnumbered 10 to 1. Nonetheless, they put up a remarkably good performance, shooting down 126 enemy aircraft in the 5 weeks or so before the fighting in Poland finally ceased. As the Polish Air Force gradually withdrew towards the southeast of Poland, on the 17th of September, the Russians invaded from the other side. Faced with those two enemies, there was no possibility of maintaining any prolonged resistance, and the Air Force was evacuated into Romania with the intention of getting to France to continue the fight from there. Once in Romania, the position was very difficult. Romania was officially neutral, but pro-Axis. There was a risk of internment for any Polish airman who found himself there. So very swiftly, they all had to become civilians, acquire false papers from the Polish embassy in Bucharest, make their way to the Black Sea, and try and escape from there. A difficult voyage, but the hardest part was the periods of calm, when suddenly you had hundreds of Polish airmen who now had nothing to do and nothing to think about apart from what might have happened to their families, their friends, their country, and what future, if any, awaited them in France. And so we come to France. For the Polish airmen, this must be the answer. France had 1 million men under arms. It had the largest amount of armour of any European country. It had the advantages of the British Expeditionary Force. It had the Royal Air Force here as well. Surely this will be the way to finally stop the German incursions. The Polish Air Force was quartered largely at Lyon-Bron, having arrived first at Marseille. But the problem they found there was, firstly, the French didn't believe they could fly, and secondly, they found, regrettably, an extraordinary lack of fighting spirit among some parts of the French Air Force. Krasnodębski, who commanded 303 Squadron here at Northolt, recalls how, on one occasion, the base he was at, they were having lunch in the mess. A messenger arrived to say that enemy aircraft were approaching. Every Polish pilot leapt to his feet and ran to the aircraft. The French commander stayed sitting down and simply said, "Well, what's the hurry? We haven't finished our lunch." On that occasion, the Poles found themselves flying against the Germans with only one Frenchman with them. Or Paszkiewicz, who again flew a 303 Squadron here at Northolt, recalls how he was flying alone with a group of French pilots when they were ordered to strafe an enemy armoured column. The French pilots decided that it was too dangerous to make such a low-level attack and refused their orders, so Paszkiewicz strafed the column on his own. Getting out of France was again another set of problems, because immediately the armistice was declared, an armed guard was put on every aircraft to stop the Polish airmen flying them to Britain. Attempting to get to the south of France to escape that way was met with frustration by French train commanders who refused to move the trains until a pistol was put to their heads. And finally, a large amount of the Polish Air Force arrived at the little port of Saint-Jean-de-Luz near Biarritz, where the port commander informed them that although the British liner, the Arundel Star, was lying just offshore waiting to take them to Britain, under the terms of the armistice, he couldn't possibly allow them to go. The Polish commander simply said to him that the several thousand Polish airmen with him were quite well behaved at the moment, but if they didn't get on that ship fairly quickly, he couldn't guarantee that this would continue. French port commander thought about the situation and then said, "I am formally going to not allow any Pole to pass through my port, and I'm going to put those orders into action in exactly 3 hours' time." By when, of course, the Arundel Star, well laden with Polish airmen, was heading towards the horizon For the Poles on the Arundel Star, their first sight of England was something rather special. For them, this wasn't England they were coming to, it was Wyspa Ostatniej Nadziei, the island of the last hope. Poland had fought, and Poland had fallen. France, with all its men, all its material, with all its allied support, France had fallen too. Everybody knew that if Britain fell, that would be the end of freedom in Europe for as long as anyone could conceivably imagine. This was indeed the island of the last hope that they were coming to. And so we come to Britain. The Poles thought this would be the real answer because now they could get their hands on first-rate equipment, Hurricanes and Spitfires, and with all their experience in combat, they were exactly what Britain needed at a crucial point in the Battle of Britain. Unfortunately, none of them spoke English, and the entire British defence system depended on controlling aircraft in the air by radio from the ground. So for the first few weeks, the pilots who came here to Northolt, who formed 303 Squadron, found themselves riding tricycles on the parade ground at RAF Uxbridge nearby, equipped with radios and compasses, and until they could respond appropriately to English orders, no one wanted to let them loose in the air. They were having a training flight, and the 303 Squadron, although composed mainly of Polish pilots, it had an English commander, Squadron Leader Kellett, and English and Canadian flight commanders. They were on a training mission. Paszkiewicz saw an enemy aircraft, asked for permission to go and make an attack. He was told, no, this is a training flight, stay with the formation. But he broke away anyway, disobeying orders, closed in on what turned out to be a Messerschmitt 110, shot it down, and as he describes it, with extraordinary ease. He had never had such power and speed and weaponry in his hands before. Returned to base. When he arrived at Northolt, Squadron Leader Kellett gave him a public reprimand for disobeying orders, followed by a public congratulation for shooting down an enemy aircraft, and the next day the squadron was declared operational. From that combat, you can see in the picture behind me a representation of Paszkiewicz shooting down the Me-110, and in the case on my right, you'll find part of the engine of the Me-110 that he shot down. Sadly, next to it, you'll also see a small pile of shrapnel, which is all that remains of Paszkiewicz's Hurricane, when he in turn was shot down about a month later. By that time, he was already an ace with 6 victories to his credit, and along with many other Polish airmen, he's buried a few miles from here at Northwood Cemetery in the War Graves plot, where the graves of Polish airmen are tended to this day with dedication and care by their compatriots who followed down the generations. Paszkiewicz's victory was the first of 126 that were credited to 303 Squadron during the Battle of Britain. That made them the highest scoring squadron of any that took part in the battle. Extraordinarily, of the 16-week period of the battle, they were only operational for about half of it, and they achieved their extraordinary results at a 70% lower casualty rate than other squadrons flying. On September the 15th, which we now celebrate as Battle of Britain Day, there are a few people who know that 1 in 5 of the pilots in the air on that day was Polish. But this was an entire Polish Air Force, complete with ground crew, intelligence, admin, and all the other necessary staff. And the ground crew were every bit as important. At the end of the day, on the 15th of September, there were 9 or 10 Hurricanes of 303 Squadron that made it back to land again at this airfield, RAF Northolt. They were so damaged by combat that all of them were classed as Category 2 battle damage, which meant they'd have to be returned to the factory for repairs. That evening, as the sun went down, the squadron had ceased to exist as a fighting force until new aircraft arrived. And that is, until everyone left the aircraft and the engineering officer, Flying Officer Biolkiewicz, came out, looked at the Hurricanes, got his boys out, wheeled them into the hangars, worked all night with who knows what, but found one way or another of making every one of those aircraft serviceable again, and at dawn on September the 16th, all the Hurricanes were lined up again, ready for service, airworthy, and the 303 Squadron continued its remarkable career without missing a beat. It's important not to overlook the role of the 4 Polish bomber squadrons. They were in fact operating from as early as 1940, when 300 and 301 squadrons were busily attacking invasion barges being lined up in France, while their colleagues in the fighter squadrons were trying to defeat the enemy in the air. They took part in the first 1,000 bomber raid. They took part in all the major operations of the war and played an extremely important role in the attempts to support the Warsaw Rising in 1944. The main problem of which was that the Red Army sat on one side of the Wisła outside Warsaw doing nothing, while the Polish Home Army attempted to defeat the Germans single-handed. We had hoped that there would be at least facilities to land and refuel provided by Stalin, but great ally that he was, he refused them. So the only way that airdrops could be made to Warsaw was by flying units from Brindisi on exceptionally long missions, which then involved low-level attempts to drop supplies over Warsaw, with inevitably huge losses of personnel and aircraft. Their story is easily overlooked, but I'm happy to say that at RAF Ingham in Lincolnshire, the original airfield from which 300 Squadron operated is now being restored as a memorial to the Polish bomber effort and will become in its own right the Polish Bomber Museum. In the case beside me here is the original uniform of Gabsiewicz, who commanded the Polish wing at RAF Northolt. Also his 316 Squadron flying scarf, along with a German pistol which he managed to liberate at some later stage in the war. When Gabsiewicz was commanding the Polish wing here, the station became effectively a Polish station, to such a point that the bar in the officers' mess generally sounded like Warsaw on a busy Saturday night, and it became the only RAF station which ever needed to have a sign hanging in the bar saying English spoken, for the benefit of thirsty and worried English officers visiting the station for the first time. In early 1944, the Polish wing moved down to Chailly, one of the advanced landing grounds on the south coast, ready to support the invasion of France. When the wing left, they presented to the officers' mess the large silver cup, which has engraved on it the numbers of all the fighter squadrons which had served here as their gift to the mess. It's still brought out on dining-in nights in the mess, because it was a sign of affection between the Polish Air Force and the station, which many pilots, including my father, always regarded to the end of his life as his second home. In 1940, in France, 2 Polish Air Force officers realized the need for there to be a single unifying standard to represent the whole of the Polish Air Force and to link it, in exile, with the home country. They made their designs, sent them to Wilno, and over the next year or so, the standard was created in private houses, in convents, in tiny pieces, in secret, under occupation. By the time it was complete, France had long since fallen, and the standard was then smuggled out in the Japanese diplomatic bag to Stockholm. From Stockholm, it was flown to London, and from London, taken to RAF Swinderby, where General Sikorski presented it to 300 Bomber Squadron. At the end of the communist period in Poland, the standard, which had been here since the war, was finally returned to Poland, along with all other symbols of state, taken by veterans of the Polish Air Force, received by the President in Pilsudski Square in an amazing and enormous ceremony. A few years ago, we realized that the Polish Air Force today doesn't use the original, which is too frail, and they have a copy made, which is the one they used to parade officially. At which point it occurred to us that if you could make one copy, maybe you can make 2. So after correspondence with the Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Air Force, he agreed to have another copy made in Poland, officially under his auspices, for our use here at Northolt, to do exactly the same thing that the original did, which is to link the Polish Air Force community in this country with the home country and the Polish Air Force at home. It was only at the last minute that I discovered that the Commander-in-Chief intended to present the standard to me personally on the parade ground, with no warning or preparation. It was an immense honor, but the thing which was moving beyond all belief was the thought that as he presented it to me, I kissed the hem, took it, and turned to present it in turn to Queen's Colour Squadron, My father was sitting, watching, who had himself received the standard some 70 years or more before, when it was serving in an operational wartime capacity. This standard represents all those veterans, all 20,000 who took part in the Polish Air Force fighting in the West. It represents not just the fighters, but also the bombers, the heavy losses they sustained when flying in support of the Warsaw Uprising. And it's perhaps fitting to end with the memory that the last Polish Air Force operation in the war was by 300 Squadron, one of the bomber squadrons, which took part in the last great raid on Berchtesgaden, Hitler's mountaintop retreat. And it was the Polish Air Force which helped finally pulverize his memory. It is sad, though, that for Poland, the war didn't end until effectively 1989, when at last they recovered their independence. But the legends and the memories they created here in Britain are something which remain to this day, of which not just RAF Northolt, but the Royal Air Force as a whole is immensely proud of. The Chief of the Air Staff regularly attends our commemoration ceremonies. The local community know what happened here and know why it's important. And there is a very clear sense that what the Poles did in Northolt and in Britain will never be forgotten.
Okay, so hello. I would like to introduce you to Marek Borzecki and his wife Cornelia Borzecka Bauer Borzecka. And a few words before we start, which I have prepared here about Marek and Cornelia, who are the authors of this movie. So Marek was born in Lublin, where he studied education and psychology at the University of Marii Curie-Skłodowska. It actually is also my university because I'm from Lublin myself, so I'm very glad to hear that you were there myself. And Marek, you worked as a professional diver on special projects. Then you arrived in London in 1975 to start you started doing some photography and filming underwater, which sounds very exciting. And then you were to work with TV Polonia Poland in Lublin and became their correspondent. So you were always interested in movie making and photography.
Yes, well, I just have to correct. I started with Lublin first, but after TV Polonia was done by Warsaw. So they took that what Lublin was doing and took that to Warsaw. So I was working for Warsaw, TV Polonia, Warsaw.
Okay.
That's
okay.
it.
All right. So Cornelia, let's start with you. You were born in Koblenz in Germany, and you came with a family, or you were born there already, but your family came from Eastern Poland, right? Drohobycz, which is now Ukraine, I believe, and used to be Kresy, Polish eastern part. And you came to London in 1974, and you graduated with a BA honors in French studies, political sciences, also international relations and politics, which is a lot of subjects, from London School of Economics and Political Sciences in 1980. And then you worked in wine and spirits industry and education and research. So again, you came more from the politics background, and I guess your interest in the Polish community also comes from your interest and your subjects of social and political studies, I guess.
And personal, because my father's family came there. They came to that territory at the time of Maria Theresa from Austria. So they were part of that sort of community there, And my father and his sister lived with us, and they told me about home, and home for them was the hobby. So I started growing up thinking about that as also my roots. Now, my father died when I was 7, so I didn't learn much Polish. I only started having to do something about Polish language when I started working with Marek, because nobody from Polish TV or the Polish community wanted to speak anything else but Polish.
Well, if she's married to Poles, she might be Polish.
Of course. So let's start maybe from, and I let you talk about this, from the origin of this film. How did you come about this film? What was your inspiration?
First of all, we were asked to help because there was this Polish lounge, which is in Northolt, which is a permanent exhibition about the achievements of Polish Airmen and things left behind them. And they wanted us to make a sort of virtual tour. So I said, I have to go and look at this to see how this is all going to look. But when Richard Konicki did the tour, it was so interesting what he did that I said, well, we have to base this on the history and marry it up with the exhibition. And so I wrote a script to do that because also I thought it was important for people to learn about the history of the Polish Air Force, because it's so remarkable that a country that didn't exist again until 1918 suddenly found the resources and also the interest to build an Air Force. It was, to me, quite remarkable because they were competing with people like Germany and Russia and Britain and France, people who had much more money. So I think it's a remarkable achievement that from 1918 to 1939, they managed to put a functioning Air Force on the feet.
Well, not on the Air Force.
So we wanted to show that. So that's how we decided to make the film, how it was made.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very interesting. And so obviously you have, so that was the historical interest, but also your, I guess, passion for making films that was playing a big role here.
Question about the people that we've met in the 25 years that we've been doing this, because these were not just people that we would make things about, they became our friends. I was motivated to buy Marek the first camera for a lot of money to start recording these people and so they can be remembered, because when I heard their sort of stories, I said it must be recorded and remembered as an inspiration for younger people and also to show people that what you can do in difficult times, to tell people that inner values will be able to surface when you are challenged. And I think it's very relevant to the situation right now. I mean, our enemy right now is invisible and different, but the same principles apply. And also, when I talk with people like President Richard Kaczorowski, about whom we made the film Moja Polska, he wanted all this, what is in history, to be passed on to young people because he also thought that they would need it. So we've been working on this sort of principle for a long time to pass on.
And unfortunately, for a lot of people, young people as well, history is not important. That was history is not important. And trying to convince them is very important because what was before could happen again. So you must remember.
Absolutely. And that brings me exactly to the next question, because this is not, let's say, a widely known history to everybody in Great Britain. And why do you think this topic is important? Why do you think that, we should be talking about history today, about things that happened, long time ago? Nobody really remembers now, especially young people. what do you think is the value of this film in for today's young generation?
Well, there's many different values. One of the values is, for example, people asking why there are so many Poles here in the UK. And we are hoping in our films to make about veterans, to make people understand that the people came here as part, of course, of having to escape, but they've also contributed really a lot to this society, and that there's been...
Not only during the war.
Yeah, there's been a lot of cooperation between Polish and British people, and the cooperation, for example, as the Air Force, it shortened, for example, the length of the war. So Polish people should be very welcomed by British people, and by a lot of people they are, but other people know absolutely nothing about it. And that's why this film was also made in English. So
I agree with you. There's a big lack of acknowledgement or knowledge or even the basic facts about the Polish contribution and during the war, especially in the Battle of Britain, which every fifth pilot at that time in the skies fighting for Britain was Polish. So maybe now I would like to ask...
Other things. People should know that Poland was first ally of England. First. Nobody else. Poland was first ally. And they contribute a lot.
Obviously. We were not always getting the recognition we should have got for that. But I think it's even more important, and there's a duty for us on our generation still to be able to put this knowledge in front of other people. And I think your film is actually fantastic in doing just that. We have a lot of information, facts, basic facts about what's happened. And also it's very well made, interestingly made. And this brings me to the next question, which is, did you face any difficulties or challenges when you were making this film? Did you find people were cooperating? How did you find people to talk to? And were these people, let's say, enthusiastic about working with you, etc.?
People were very interested because, as you can see in the film, we interviewed some personnel from the RAF as well. But wherever people were very interested, and the person who actually initiated the making of this film, which is Mr. Rodney Biles. He's got a Polish wife, and because of her, he came to know a lot about such people. So he was the person who was really pushing for this film to be made, and he was the one who contacted us together with Richard.
And that is very important, that not Polish people want to do that film, but English.
Ah, very interesting.
That is very important things.
And amongst even our neighbors, if we've given them a copy of the film, they were thrilled to find out about what Poles did, and very pleased to see the film. But there's also another sort of aspect of this. Because of Brexit right now, people think that England is just going to pull out of Europe. England is not going to pull out of Europe. England is going to renegotiate certain aspects of its relationship with Europe. But, for example, I can see on Facebook the ambassador posted there's such a cooperation between Poland and England that's being signed currently, and other ones. So I'm very hopeful that also in the future, Poland and Britain are going to have a good relationship, are going to work together for the greater benefit of Europe.
Now, about the difficulties and, on one way, it was very easy to make that film because I had a lot of materials. I had material opening of the Polish launch and a lot of really huge materials. But also there was problem because what to choose? Was too much materials, and we were asked to do 15 minutes, and 15 minutes is almost impossible. We managed 21, but 21 minutes for that sort of film to put so much material interesting is almost impossible. So Wojtek, Jan, they were really good to shorten. Cornelia was working, Rodney, and they were good. And usually stay away from editing. I hate editing. That's one thing. Other thing is, I've got so many nice shots that, that should go. That should go. But that's some things won't look good. So a good editor just put that to the dustbin straight away. and use what is one. I think it was very successful. 21 minutes for all history of Polish aviation, building between the wars, starting war, fighting in Poland, escape to Romania, to France, fighting in France, and Island of Last Hope. Remarkable. And that was everything in that film. And very interesting, I say. And also, Richard Kornicki, I work with a lot of people, but there was, with Richard, he just said one thing and no repeat. And everything was taken. That was impossible, almost.
He was very professional.
No repeat, just one thing, next subject. I just said, stand there, you're standing there, next subject, and then next subject was excellent. Also, we have to remember one thing. It's not only fighter pilot, but also bombers. They were very, very important because bombers took war to enemy territory first. Not fighter pilot, bombers. Okay. And my first film what I made, that was bombers. About bombers.
So there are obviously more films that you have made apart from this one, which I hope we will be able to maybe broadcast at some point to the wider audience.
There will be problems because the rights got Polish television. Okay, that's what it is.
Okay, but perhaps you can.
I got some interviews with pilots, so we could use that because I got a lot of interviews.
Okay, but that's also very valuable materials, obviously. So just would like to, because I mean you said about the history, and I agree. In that movie, there's very smooth and short and succinct explanation of the route that the Polish army was taking through Romania and through France, and also very well said about the attitudes of the French. I thought I would make a point of it because that says a lot about how about the fighting spirit at that time, and we also are very familiar with this history because my husband's granddad, Felix Golinski, was actually going through this route as well from Poland. He was actually stationed originally in Toruń with the Polish Army, and he was a mechanic. So he was a ground force who then went through Romania to France.
As a tourist.
Exactly. And then after that, they all arrived to Britain. So he was then stationed in Northolt with 302, I believe. So, we have a lot of sympathy and, let's say, passion for listening to this film, especially because that is also part of our family here. Finally, I would like to ask you a question. What do you think about what is the most relevant from the history of these Polish pilots fighting for Britain? What is still relevant for us? What kind of values do you think are the most important that they had that we should have today? I know we partly talked about this, but maybe you'd like to just point out two or three that you think are the most important for young people.
Well, that's one thing. Don't give up.
Yes.
Let's finish.
And also make sacrifices for others. Don't only think about yourself. Like today we have the culture of self-obsession. You have to make sacrifices also for others and for some bigger cause and for the bigger good in life.
Well, there is also in Lublin on the Piłsudski Memorial. You remember that? There are two...
Of course, yes.
Yes.
In Plac Unii.
Twojej historii nie ma prawa do przyszłości. Something like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Also don't know history, don't have a right to a future in translation. Yes,
that's what General Piłsudski was saying, and that was very true.
Marshal.
So I think, unless you would like to say anything else, I think it was really great interview. We probably covered everything. And really appreciate your participation, and thank you very much.
We're very glad that you will be distributing that because the Polish Airforce Memorial Committee wants to educate as many people as possible this was all going to go into the Polish schools. But at the moment, everything has been interrupted. But it will go there because the Polish schools asked for it straight away when some of their staff saw it. They thought it would be ideal for them as a teaching aid. And we have to familiarize people with history as much as possible because of the successes and the failures we can learn.
Yes, and the good opportunity here will be that we're planning to go with the Britishpoles, which is the portal you're probably familiar with, which has quite a wide reach within the Polish and British communities, because I myself represent SU, Polish SU, which we actually work for promotion of Polish-British bonds. So we're aiming together with Britishpoles to reach this part of the, let's say, spectrum here in Britain and in Poland, people who actually do have shared this common history. So this film will be part of the, let's say, reaching out and getting more people interested, especially on a big occasion of the anniversary of Battle of Britain. There will be many events, and also we are cooperating with British, with the Polish Heritage Days, within which we can, let's say, broadcast this film today.